Someone loves you deeply, even after knowing your age. But the twist will shock you. There's something you've been feeling lately, something subtle, something you haven't fully named yet, but it keeps showing up in small, quiet ways. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make you pause and wonder, why does this feel different? Because not every connection announces itself clearly. Some of them arrive quietly, through attention that feels a little deeper than usual, through conversations that linger longer than they should, through moments where someone seems to understand you without needing explanation. And at first, you don't think much of it. You tell yourself it's normal. You tell yourself it's just kindness, or coincidence, or timing. But then it continues. And when something continues like that, when it doesn't fade the way casual interactions usually do, it starts to carry meaning. Because consistency reveals intention. And intention, even when it's not spoken, can be felt. That's where this begins. Not in something obvious, but in something that quietly keeps returning. Because someone, somewhere in your life, has started to feel something for you that goes beyond surface-level connection. And what makes it different is not just that they feel it, it's how they feel it. Because this isn't something light. This isn't something passing. This is something they've thought about, something they've reflected on, something they didn't rush into without awareness. Because they know your age, and that matters. Not because age defines everything, but because it changes how people think, how they evaluate, how they decide what makes sense and what doesn't. And despite knowing that, they didn't step away. They didn't ignore what they felt. They didn't dismiss it as something unrealistic or temporary. Instead, they stayed with it, quietly, carefully, trying to understand it. Because when someone feels something that doesn't fit into their expectations, they don't always act on it immediately. They observe it first, they question it, they try to make sense of it before allowing it to become real. And that's what they've been doing. Not avoiding you, but processing you, trying to understand why this connection feels different, why it doesn't fade, why it continues to grow in a way they didn't expect. Because this isn't just attraction. If it were, it would have passed already. This is something deeper, something that connects beyond surface-level traits, something that touches understanding, familiarity, emotional resonance, and that kind of connection doesn't come often, which is exactly why it becomes harder to ignore. Because now, they're not just dealing with a feeling, they're dealing with a decision between what makes sense and what feels real. Because on one side, there are expectations, social ideas, logical concerns, things that tell them how this should be seen. But on the other side, there's the connection itself, the way they feel when they talk to you, the way their attention naturally goes toward you, the way something about you stays in their mind longer than it should. And when those two sides don't match, confusion begins. Because now it's not just about liking someone, it's about deciding whether to trust that feeling, or to walk away from it because it doesn't fit into what they expected. And that's where the silence comes from. Not distance, not lack of feeling, but hesitation. Because they are thinking, they are weighing, they are trying to understand what this means and what it could become. And during that process, they don't always show everything. Because when someone is unsure how to move forward, they slow down, they hold back, they become more careful, not because they don't care, but because they care enough to not act impulsively. And that's why this connection feels the way it does right now. Close, but not fully expressed. Present, but not completely clear. Because what you're feeling is not absence, it's restraint. And restraint often comes from internal conflict, because part of them is drawn to you. But another part is questioning what that means. And that tension creates a kind of energy that you can feel even if it hasn't been explained. Because when someone is emotionally engaged but mentally uncertain, it shows, not through clear words, but through subtle behavior, through attention that feels intentional, through moments that feel meaningful, through a presence that doesn't feel casual. And that's what makes you notice. Because something about this connection doesn't feel ordinary. It doesn't follow the usual pattern. It doesn't behave the way casual interactions do. It feels deeper, more intentional, more aware. And that's because it is. Because they are not approaching this lightly. They are thinking about it. They are questioning it. They are trying to understand whether this is something they should allow or something they should walk away from. And that process, that's where everything is building. Because eventually, they won't be able to stay in that space forever. Not when the feeling continues. Not when the connection remains present. Not when ignoring it becomes harder than facing it. Because emotions that are real don't disappear just because they are inconvenient. They stay. They grow. They reach a point where they demand clarity. And that's where this is heading. Not just toward expression, but toward a decision. Because at some point, they will have to choose. Not between you and something else, but between what they feel and what they believe they should do. And that choice is what will change everything. Because once it is made, this connection will no longer stay in the same quiet, uncertain space. It will move, in one direction or the other. And when it does, the truth behind everything you've been sensing will finally become clear. And as that moment of decision slowly moves closer, something else begins to shift, not just within them, but within you too. Because even though they are the one navigating the internal conflict, you are the one experiencing the emotional atmosphere of that conflict. And that atmosphere, even when it's quiet, begins to influence how you feel, how you think, and how you interpret everything that happens between you. Because when someone is holding something back, not out of disinterest but out of uncertainty, it creates a very specific kind of energy, one that feels close but incomplete, one that feels intentional but not fully expressed. And that kind of energy doesn't go unnoticed, especially not in a connection that already carries depth. And that's what makes this different. Because if this were something casual, something surface level, you wouldn't feel this kind of subtle tension. You wouldn't notice the pauses, the hesitations, the slight shifts in how they show up. But you do notice because something about this connection has already moved beyond casual. And once something moves beyond that point, even small changes begin to feel significant. Because now you're not just interacting, you're aware. Aware of the way their attention changes. Aware of how they respond. Aware of the difference between when they are fully present and when they are holding something back. And that awareness, while it brings understanding, also brings a kind of quiet questioning. Because you begin to sense that there is more happening beneath the surface than what is being shown. Not in a dramatic way, but in a restrained way, like something is being carefully managed instead of freely expressed. And that restraint is what creates the space you're feeling right now. Because when someone allows themselves to fully express what they feel, the connection moves forward naturally, without needing to be interpreted or analyzed. But when they hold back, when they are unsure of what to do with what they feel, the connection stays in a kind of suspended state, not moving forward, not ending, just existing in between. And being in between can feel heavier than either clarity or distance, because clarity gives you direction, distance gives you closure. But in between, it keeps everything open. It keeps you aware of what could be, without showing you what will be. And that's where your mind begins to engage more deeply. Because now you're not just experiencing the connection, like you're trying to understand it, trying to make sense of what is being felt but not fully shown, trying to interpret the pauses, the timing, the subtle signals that don't come with clear explanation. And that process, while natural, can slowly pull you into a space where you begin to overanalyze what is actually quite simple at its core. Because at the core of all this, there is one truth. They feel something, but they are not fully ready to act on it yet. And everything else you're experiencing is a reflection of that one truth. The hesitation, the inconsistency, the carefulness, the moments of closeness followed by moments of distance, all of it comes from the same place. Not confusion about you, but uncertainty about what to do with what they feel for you. And that distinction matters, because it changes how you understand the situation. Because instead of seeing it as something lacking, you begin to see it as something unresolved. And unresolved situations don't stay still forever. They move, slowly, gradually, but they move toward us something, because emotions that are strong enough to stay present cannot remain undefined forever. They reach a point where they either become expressed or they become suppressed, and both outcomes create clarity, but in different ways. Because if they choose to express what they feel, if they allow themselves to move beyond hesitation and into action, then everything that once felt uncertain begins to align. The connection becomes visible in a way that doesn't require interpretation, and what was once subtle becomes clear. But if they choose to suppress it, if they decide that the situation, the circumstances, or their own reasoning outweigh what they feel, then that creates clarity too, not through expression, but through absence, through the gradual fading of something that was never fully allowed to exist openly. And that's where this moment becomes important for you. Not because you can control which direction they take, but because you are already beginning to understand what is actually happening. Because earlier, it may have felt like something confusing, something difficult to explain, something that didn't fully make sense. But now you can see the pattern. You can see the hesitation. You can see the restraint. You can see that this is not random. And that awareness is what keeps you grounded. Because instead of being pulled into the uncertainty, you are observing it, recognizing it, understanding it for what it is. Not something unclear, but something unfinished. And that changes how you experience it. Because now you're not trying to force clarity where it doesn't exist yet. You're allowing it to unfold. Because you understand that this situation is still in motion, that something is still forming, that a decision is still being processed, and that awareness allows you to remain steady even while things feel uncertain. Because you're no longer expecting immediate answers. You're recognizing that this is a process that is leading somewhere, even if that somewhere hasn't been revealed yet. And that's where patience becomes different. Not passive, not waiting blindly, but aware, grounded, connected to what is real instead of what is imagined. Because what is real right now is this: there is a connection, there is feeling, there is hesitation, and there is a decision forming. And that decision is what will define everything that comes next. Because once it is made, the space between you will change, not gradually, but clearly. Because decisions don't just shift emotions, they shift direction. And direction is what turns something from possibility into reality, or from possibility into memory. And that's why this moment matters. Not because it is final, but because it is leading to something that will be. Something that will no longer stay hidden. Something that will no longer stay unspoken. Something that will become visible through what they choose to do. And when that happens, you will no longer need to interpret anything. You will not need to analyze. You will not need to question. Because clarity, once it arrives, doesn't leave space for confusion. It replaces it completely. And that is what this entire experience is moving toward. Not just feeling, but understanding. Not just connection, but definition. And when that definition finally reveals itself, you will see everything that once felt subtle, in a way that is clear, direct, and impossible to misunderstand.